Oh, greetings loves, it is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. Today I have for you a very special TGF Q&A edition. Specifically, these are questions that are asked by my Patreon supporters. I decided that this might be a good opportunity for people to just get to know a little bit more about me, as much as you can as an anonymous person on the internet. But regardless, yeah, there is a lot of good questions that have been asked, and I do want to get to them. I apologize, I will not get to every single question that was asked of me. Some of the questions I don't think really are applicable. They were redundant with other questions asked, and some of them I simply just don't have good answers for. So I'm simply addressing the ones that I best can, and that is pretty much like 95% of them. So again, I apologize if yours didn't make the cut, but I may do this again in the future. Who knows? We'll see. But regardless, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, starting off, the first question comes from Wizard. Wizard asks, what does the average TGF range day look like? What are your go-to drills to maximize your day? Well, TGF range days are kind of funny because I usually am filming. If I'm filming, I'm probably doing some cinematic stunts and fun little things that I can do and sprinkle into content there, but otherwise I am actually running a lot of drills when I am filming, and beyond that I also try to complement any range day with some good drills so that I'm maintaining a good skill set. Obviously, whenever you go to the range, you want to make sure that you got a good baseline to work from, so I do like to have some drills that I can set some standards to and be able to repeat them consistently. A lot of drills like failure to stop, bill drill are really good. More dynamic ones like the Marsoc drill is great too. I also like doing dot torture just so that I remember my holds. Having things like that are really important just to have a good baseline to work from, to set some standards for yourself, and to just track your progress easily as you go forward. Now, you can obviously incorporate more dynamic drills and switch it up, but it's good to just have in your pocket a repertoire of some standards. So that's kind of what I do. And yeah, I do change it up a lot, but I do keep some of the most common drills around for most range days just to make sure that I know that I'm staying on top of my game. All right, next up, Rob K asks, thoughts on reviewing loaned guns or gear? I've done it and I want to do more. I've only had one thing that was loaned to me, and that was the Elcan Spectre by one of my Patreon supporters actually, and that's really cool. That was easy. It was simple to get it shipped to me and to throw it on a rifle and then mail it back. That's no big deal. Obviously, things like firearms are a little bit more complicated. You do have to do an FFL transfer, but people do that all the time. Yeah, so I'm honestly really happy to try doing stuff like that if people have things to offer. I do have quite a backlog of things that I actually do want to review, and I have some friends locally that also will loan me some gear that I'm going to try. So regardless, it is nice to have that, so I'm always open to any suggestions if you have them. All right, next up, Nubbles asks, what is your favorite eyeshadow? I don't have one. I'm always changing it up. I'm always trying new things. I think variety is the spice of life, and I just go on Etsy and just buy homebrew eyeshadows. The latest stuff I'm using is from a store branded as VIPG. I don't know what that even stands for. I literally just saw a pretty picture and I hit the buy button and decided to try it out. There's a lot of good stuff on Etsy if you are looking for some more interesting homebrew kind of stylistic accessories and makeup especially. It's a really great place for that. So that's kind of just what I do. Ken asks, how do you feel we as responsible gun owners can come together regardless of political beliefs, race, gender, or creed in order to defend our basic human right to keep and bear arms? Well, that's a really good question. For one, I've got my own opinions about rights. Rights are not real, they're an abstraction, they are granted, they are never given, and they're never guaranteed. A right is simply just somebody saying that they will allow you to do something until they don't. And we see that all the time in the legal system. That is just simply how things are. Now, because tyrants will always play by their own rules, I think that we just need to make sure that we are very steadfast when it comes to anything threatening our rights. That means not getting lazy. That means not pretending that everything's okay, because it's not. The world's constantly on fire and everything is crazy. So yeah, more action, more political action is very important, especially when it comes to things like having the ability to defend ourselves with firearms, for example. Not many people enjoy that ability legally. We do for now. That could change, and it's constantly being infringed by the state. So yeah, regardless, you gotta keep fighting your fight. And if it's a common one, such as firearms, I think that regardless of where we come from in this, we can all agree that yes, we want to keep our guns, we want to keep our ability to use them freely, and to not allow the state to micromanage that for us. Now, I don't think that we need to all band together under a party or anything like that. I think that we all as individuals, regardless of who we are, can contact our senators, our representatives, we can demonstrate, we can have dialogue about this stuff, but it needs to be continuous, it needs to be visible, and it needs to be very annoying. I think that's one of the biggest tricks to getting representatives and senators to actually listen to their constituents, because they absolutely don't have to. You need to just simply make it sound scary enough for them to listen to you by means of saying, hey, like, there's a lot of people who will not vote for this politician if you don't support our rights. It's really simple. Regardless, yeah, I think that we can come together on common issues. We don't even have to share the same spaces, but we can fight the same fight. All right, Captain Clambeard asks, you featured rifles and handguns so far. Are you interested in reviewing shotguns in the future? Absolutely. I think shotguns are important. A lot of people have them. They're very relevant if you're talking about firearms at all, especially kinds of firearms. They make up a very large swath of them. I personally have never owned a shotgun because I've never had a purpose for it. I think their utility is extremely limited, and I don't think most people really need them. I completely disagree with Joe Biden on this. I think everybody should have an AR, and maybe a few people should have a shotgun. But regardless, they're out there, they exist. I probably should be talking about them. I'm personally really excited to review something like a Benelli M4. I do have a couple of friends who have them, so I probably will sneak one onto the channel at some point. Just hasn't been a very big priority. Okay, Helena Start asks, I was wondering what your passions and interests were outside of the gun sphere, and if you didn't do a gun channel, would you have done a YouTube on any of them? Well, in terms of other interests, I really like hiking, I like photography, I like music, both playing and listening to music, and I really am interested in history and politics. All of those are really big passions of mine as far as subjects go, but I don't think I would have ever done a YouTube channel on any of them. I personally chose to do a YouTube channel because the firearm community does have an interesting ecosystem on YouTube, and even though it's fairly monotonous and I am trying to break that up by simply doing what I'm doing, I do think it's advantageous to add to it. And even though I'm against the algorithm here, it's still just a really good place to be when you're talking about firearms. I really like the format. The rest, I just personally want to just pursue those. I don't really want to present information about them. So that's kind of just where I'm at. Kyle asks, I recently accepted myself as trans and have started to present myself as more feminine. Congratulations. I have been very concerned about how I will be perceived when I return to ranges and gun shows. I'm wondering if you have any tips or tricks on how to feel more comfortable interacting in those situations. Well, that's a really, really good question, and that's a really hard one. You can't control what anyone does. Some people are just going to be mean to you. That's simply a fact. You are putting yourself out there, you are taking risks, and understand that that is commendable, and you should be proud of yourself. But if you are having any anxiety over that, I think that there is a lot to be said about bringing somebody who cares about you and loves you with you. Somebody who's going to support you no matter what. That's going to really build a lot of confidence. It's going to make things a lot more comfy. So turning it into a more social situation is always a plus. And further, just don't be afraid to be yourself. If somebody's going to accept you, then they're going to accept you. If they're not, they're not. And if they don't, you just need to walk away. Don't let it ruin your day. Try to just focus on the good and try to have more positive interactions in whichever ways you can control it. Obviously, so much of this is out of our control, but you can only do so much. But beyond all of that, I do think there is something to be said about people transcending their prejudices when they share a common interest with somebody. In my experience, it doesn't really matter what you are, what identity you have, the color of your skin, anything. If you go to a lot of ranges and a lot of gun shows, A lot of people honestly are going to see past whatever prejudices they even have, and they're probably going to just be happy that you're there sharing a common interest with them. That's my experience. I can't say that's the truth for everybody, but yeah, a lot of people really are a lot more apt to be friendly on a one-to-one basis as they would be online. So don't let rhetoric scare you away from doing the things you love. Trapper Jeff, MD, not an actual doctor, asks, they say you can tell a lot about a person out here in the Mojave Wasteland by the company they keep. Who's your favorite Fallout New Vegas companion? Well, fortunately, I do really love Fallout New Vegas. Big surprise there. A lot of the companions are honestly really great in that game. I really enjoyed playing with a lot of them, but my favorite probably is going to be Veronica from the Brotherhood of Steel. She's a very complex character. Her story evolves really beautifully and is quite compelling. Also, she's got so many useful skills and is generally just extremely helpful to have in the party. So out of all of them, I do enjoy them all, but Veronica is probably my top pick. Dex asks, what's your preferred style of iron sights for rifles? Not necessarily just AR sights, and why? Well, the answer is aperture sights with a simple front sight post. I have shot so many different rifles of all sorts of ages and eras, and I always just come back to the simple aperture sight. It's something that lasted to this very day in terms of its relevance, and I don't think anything really beats it. I've used a lot of leaf sights, especially on more comm block kind of guns, but I've always found that the peep sights are just always going to be faster, they're going to be easier to acquire, and I just shoot them very accurately. I don't think that that's like going to make or break a platform or anything, but I do think that they're absolutely kind of the best of the best in my experience. Patrick Dolan asks, would you consider doing a meet and shoot with followers of the channel? I know anonymity is kind of important, but I would love to meet other firearms people in the community. Well, if I was not running an anonymous YouTube channel and I had all the time in the world, yeah, I would love to, honestly. But that simply is not the case. So the answer is definitely no. But that said, I do think that there is something to be said about getting out into your community and meeting new people, and that's really important. And you can do that whether you're at a gun store, at a range, if you're at a gun show. But honestly, I think that one of the best occasions is competitive shooting, actually. I found that those are rewarding for a number of reasons. I love competitive shooting, and I'm getting back into it recently, and it's been a great time. But part of that is because it's such a good social event. It's really fun. I meet a lot of new people. I see a lot of old faces I haven't seen in a while, so I think that comps are probably one of the best ways to actually socialize with your firearms community. Emily Dorr Refrigerator asks, what knives do you like to EDC? Well, Emily, I honestly don't really EDC knives except for this dinky little, where is it? This dinky little knife on this Leatherman squirt, which I pretty much never use. I use this Leatherman squirt all the time. I carry this in my purse, I use the pliers, I use the screwdriver bits all the time. It's super useful, but the blade itself, honestly not useful. I really don't run into things every day where I need to cut things, and I'm not in a place where I don't already have a knife. So if I'm out in the field, yeah, absolutely. I love knives, they're very useful in the field, but for my everyday business, nah, don't really need one. Iron Akela asks, what are your thoughts on bullpups, and which ones, if any, have you shot? Well, I really want to like bullpups. I think they're great on paper. Who doesn't want a shorter rifle that doesn't actually remove barrel length? That's awesome. The weight and everything that it balances in your hands is just going to be so much better, and the ergonomics can be better. It's honestly a great idea. In practice, I honestly hate bullpups. I find that they're just awkward in general between reloading. Brass ejection is weird. If you go offhand, your brass is going to be hitting you in the teeth. And if it ejects out the back, there's certain guns out there that just simply jam up because of that, and they just don't work really well. Furthermore, the worst part about the bullpups are triggers. They're always god-awful. They're always mushy. They're terrible. Now, that being said, if you're familiar with your platform, you should be able to shoot it well no matter what kind of trigger you're running. But if I can get a better trigger, if I can get a better handling gun, a gun that's easier to maneuver and reload with, then yeah, I'll take a little bit of barrel length just to deal with that. I've personally shot Kel-Tec bullpups of various kinds. I've shot, Steyr AUG, which honestly was very underwhelming. I also have shot some bullpup kits for like SKS, which doesn't count. That's absolutely absurd. But regardless, with my limited experience with bullpups, I have not been very pleased. I'm always willing to try new ones. I'm still open-minded about it, but I just haven't seen a compelling reason to actually choose a bullpup over any traditional firearm as far as rifles go. So yeah, that's kind of my take. Maybe I'll change. Maybe I will find a magical bullpup that will solve all my problems. I don't know. Time will tell. Clayton asks, how can we make the firearm community more welcoming and inclusive to all those who might potentially be interested in guns, but may otherwise be turned off by the conventional portrayal or dominant narrative of firearm culture? Great question. That's another reason why I do this channel. Specifically to kind of open up the doors, so to speak, to make it a little bit more inclusive and accessible and just generally better, honestly, in my opinion. Not to say that I'm better than everyone else, but I just want information to just be more accessible, and I think that's better if it is. Now, in terms of making the community more welcoming and inclusive, I don't think you're going to change any of that. You have to build your own community, and that means finding your own people. So there is no all-inclusive giant umbrella community of the firearms world. There just simply isn't. Community is such a weird abstraction, and it's a very misused term in my opinion. What matters is creating your own community, finding real people that you know in real life, and doing cool things with them. Find people around you that you like, who like guns, and do cool things with guns. It's really that simple. Obviously easier said than done, and a lot of people are more isolated than others. That's simply the nature of the world. But do whatever you can to build your own community. That's my suggestion. Deviant Olam asks, do you have any thoughts on Oregon's Measure 114 and the possible impacts for our folk down in the Beaver State? Yeah, I sure do have some thoughts. For one, I think it's disgusting and atrocious. That makes the barrier of entry to firearm ownership only higher, so it becomes more of an economic privilege. It simply just excludes people who have lesser financial means to obtain firearms. And that goes against every single thing that I believe in. So to that, I say, no, screw you. That really sucks. Also, the mag ban, any magazines over, I think, 10 rounds capacity in that measure, that's absurd. It's honestly a really cheap trick by politicians who want to appear that they're making changes in the world and making the world a safer place, but anyone who shoots a gun knows that a mag capacity ban is not going to make the world safer, even if you thought that making guns less capable would make the world safer. Reloading is not hard. We train to reload as fast as we can. That's like literally part of what we do. It's simply just cheap brownie points, and it makes everything that much harder for firearm owners, and that sucks. So yeah, 114 can go straight to hell. I really, really am tired of seeing these measures go by and people touting them as safety measures when they only punish people for not making enough money and owning guns for their own self-defense or whatever recreational shooting activities. It's absurd. MK Ultra 64 asks, do you have any misgivings about getting tattoos? People ask why I don't have any, and I joke that I don't want to be identified by the state, but I'm absolutely serious. Well, you know, that's a very personal decision. You need to have your own threat assessment if you are trying to be anonymous for whatever reason, and you don't want to be easily identified, then yes, tattoos are really easy to use to identify people by. That's generally one of the biggest giveaways. Whether you're actually worried about that or not, your own concern. But my suggestion is, yeah, I mean, if you are, then you should take that seriously. But I think that there are ways to find a balance, and that could be just simply getting tattoos in places that most people can't see. It's not really that fun, but it is a good compromise if you need to. Armstrong Arms asks, how, if at all, have the principles and fundamentals of shooting sports impacted your life as a whole? It's a great question. Learning how to shoot has given me a skill set that is very perishable and one that has a lot of room for advancement in. I will never be the shooter that I truly want to be. I will never be satisfied, so I'm always hungry for it. And that really motivates me. It really requires me to exercise a lot of self-discipline, and by doing so, I just simply get better at self-discipline as well. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. By having some healthy objectives in mind to stimulate you and to drive you is really wonderful. And beyond all that, it's also encouraged me to pursue a more active lifestyle. I am definitely more interested in fitness as a result because I want to be the best I can be. I want to be as fast as I can be, and I want to wear all this gear, and that's heavy and it wears you out. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it is very all-consuming, but it's also very rewarding to me personally. Alex asks, if you had the means, what vanity firearm would you buy? Probably very easily the Chiappa Rhino. I know it's very silly, but I think it's pretty cool that there's a space revolver out there that shoots from the bottom of the cylinder instead of the top, so that you have a lower bore axis closer to your hand, so there's less recoil. And I'd love to get one chambered in 357 mag. I think that's a really cool round. And the nebula finish that it comes in it is, ooh, so good. So it's kind of a similar question to a previous one, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. No Thanks asks, how do you find people you're comfortable enough to go on outings with? And how do you find places to go out to? Well, for one, I think, again, finding local gun clubs that are friendly and amenable to you and your objectives is really important. Going out to shooting competitions, again, is a really good way to meet new people. And further, just maybe find people in your locale who just simply are friends that like guns. Again, easier said than done, but we're all out there, and it's just a matter of seeking them out. So go to places with guns, talk to people, and join clubs, go to comps. Find meetup groups also that share overlapping interests. Doesn't have to be shooting. You can also go do some outdoorsy things, and you're bound to meet other people who also are into shooting, who also happen to be doing other outdoorsy things. Or, you know, in martial arts. In the martial arts world, if you are pursuing martial arts, a lot of people in that world are defensively oriented, so some of them also have firearms. Again, great way to meet new people. You'd be really surprised, honestly. Tangentially related, next up I have two questions that were very similar, so I'm just going to kind of roll them in together. They're from Ollie and the Nanonites. The question is, do you have any experience and or interest in unarmed martial arts and combatives? Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you are defensively oriented, you absolutely should be learning how to fight unarmed. Guns are honestly marginally useful in most defense cases. They're both legally dubious and honestly just not practical for closer ranges. So if you are worried about your own defense, then yeah, you absolutely should be studying some form of martial arts. I've dabbled in Kung Fu and Wing Chun and Western boxing. I would like to more actively pursue some school of martial arts. Honestly, maybe Muay Thai, probably take some BJJ or some more boxing. But regardless, combining both, I think some form of striking school as well as grappling is going to really do you a lot of favors. So taking a multifaceted approach is really great. But yeah, martial arts, awesome. Jessica asks, how can we identify good local places to shoot? Well, when we're talking about shooting outdoors, there's a lot to be said about this. I put out a whole video about it, but what you need to do is identify what local public lands you have around you, what bureaus manage them, and then you simply just need to talk to them. You need to ask them, hey, where can I shoot on your land? You're going to have to talk to whatever warden or whoever manages that land. And that's honestly kind of just how it goes. Yeah, there's a lot of word of mouth kind of spots that you might come across, but again, it's still good to vet them and still make sure that you legally can actually shoot on them, because so many people will say, oh, I've shot at this place, but is that legal? I don't know. So yeah, you probably should vet that. Always check in with whoever manages public lands, but yeah, public lands are a really good way to shoot in the woods. Donald Weber asks, are you going to explore armor and carriers or concealed carry for those of a small stature? It's a really good question. We're all different sizes, we're all built different, all different shapes and sizes. So I personally try to only speak from my own experience. I can't say what gear is good for somebody who is shorter than me, because I'm not that person. I generally try to stay true to what I do review with my own experience, obviously, but I do try to explore that to some extent, but I just can't do that great of a job. And I would really rather defer to somebody who can speak from their own experience and actually go into that in depth. Now, when applicable, yeah, I think I might go into that, but honestly, if there is someone out there who is shorter than me, they should talk about it themselves. And I encourage people to do that. We need more people having this kind of discussion in the first place, because we're all different. Owen asks, what is your favorite war film and why? Personally, my favorite war film is probably Dunkirk. I don't think it was the most compelling or intense or extreme or colorful film I've ever seen. But I do really like the concept behind it. I love that you pretty much never see the Germans the entire time. That really casts an interesting atmosphere over that movie, where you are just constantly on the edge of your seat waiting for things to happen, and you just never quite get there. And it really helps you immerse yourself in the way that people probably were feeling, all those English soldiers were feeling when they were lined up on the beach, just waiting and waiting and waiting, and they could be pounced on at any second. So the suspense building was fantastic, and the sound design honestly was absolutely brilliant. If you haven't paid attention to the sound design in that movie, watch it again. It's honestly very genius. There's a lot of really interesting tricks that they used to further that immersion. And honestly, yeah, I just think that was a very interesting approach to a war film. Very unorthodox. Ryan asks, what are your thoughts on shotguns? Well, kind of went into this before, but yeah, I think shotguns are extremely niche. I have never owned one because I simply don't have a purpose to. But they are really good for those purposes. If you are hunting birds, for example, obviously the shotgun's the only thing you should use. So yeah, I'm not a bird hunter. I don't need a shotgun for that. I'm not doing weird kind of breaching activities either that would require a shotgun. Again, very niche, but they can be useful. You just want to make sure that you actually are using the right tool for the right job, as always. Greed and Sharp asks, what's your favorite Impractical dumb gun and have you fired it? Well, I would say, speaking of shotguns, I have always wanted to shoot an AA-12. I think that's not the most practical shotgun, but I think it's really interesting. I also just don't really think shotguns are that practical, but I do think that that's a really cool gun. It's got an interesting place in Hollywood history. It's very vibey. It's absolutely ridiculous. So that's pretty cool, but I have not fired it. Probably the most impractical and dumb gun that I've ever fired is a Soviet Maxim. I guess it's not even impractical or dumb necessarily if you are a Soviet soldier in the trenches during World War II, but I think that having a giant, very heavy gun like that on wheels is not the most practical thing, but really fun. Skelly B asks, if air-style rifles become inaccessible for new buyers in the future, do you think you would continue producing videos with your current, presumably grandfathered equipment, or would you consider showing how to make the most of whatever new options were available? It's a great question. I really hope I never see the day that any of my guns become grandfathered, because that would really suck. But if that did happen, I would still present information on them because they are relevant. The guns that I am using are common. if they do get grandfathered, everyone's still going to be shooting them. They're not going away anytime soon, so they are quite relevant. But on the other side of that, yes, I absolutely make a concerted effort to talk about what options are available and what I think are best, as always. That's simply just maintaining my relevancy and making sure that I'm presenting information that is useful, especially for new shooters. Violet asks, I have a question related to priorities. I found a subcompact 9mm that I enjoy and shoot well, but it doesn't have the parts availability of, say, a Glock. Is it okay to focus on equipment that you prefer, or should a person switch platforms to the most readily repairable? It's a very good question. It's also a very subjective one. I think that if you've got a gun that fits in your hands really well and you're happy with it and you don't want to change anything on it, you've got all the mags you'll ever need for your lifetime, then yeah, by all means, go for it. But something to be said about parts availability is the ability to make the gun work in your hands well for you. Not all guns are for everybody, but generally if you get some sort of Glock model out there, you can modify it to do whatever you need to. And whatever the shape of your hand is, they've got all the back straps, you can really adapt it to do exactly what you need it to do that any other gun could do just as well. And furthermore, it's not the gun that makes the shooter, it's the shooter that makes the gun go bang. So if you train on it, you're probably going to make it work even if it isn't the most perfect fit for you. I think parts availability is extremely important, especially when it comes to things like holsters. That is the biggest pain point that I've seen next to magazines in terms of choosing a handgun. Getting a good holster usually requires you to buy an extremely mainstream handgun. And in that case, yeah, I think that you probably should err on the side of getting what is most ubiquitous, what is most common, what is most readily available. I think that worrying about the little tiny details of whatever Glock 19 clone that you want to try to get is not really the way forward. Just make sure that you're being reasonable and sensible in your choices. Dana asks, do you have any recommendations for field clothes that are practical, like multicam uniforms, but don't scream, hi, I'm a tactical hype beast, come take all my gear after you kill me? There's a lot of stuff out there. I think that the tactical clothing market also leaves a lot to be desired. I think that there's a lot of stuff out there that is just absolute garbage and it's just all marketing and hot air. But higher tier stuff that is proven, like Cry and UF Pro, are fantastic choices if you can afford it. And there's even some good budget options out there like True Spec and Helican Tex. Those are honestly all solid choices. So there's a really good gamut out there. Simply check out those brands. Get what you think is best. Just make sure that you're not buying some no-name company from Alibaba. It's probably going to be absolute garbage. So make sure that you're getting good quality stuff that will actually last you in the field. And David asks, when working with less experienced gun owners, what sorts of drills do you find helpful in teaching the fundamentals? Very good question. I really like this one because I also teach a lot of new shooters. And what I suggest that new shooters do is when you first buy a gun, don't buy any ammo for it. Bring it home, dry fire with it. Get used to the manual of arms, know how all the mechanisms work, get used to how your gun feels, get used to moving with your gun, all the motions of bringing it up to ready and shooting and aiming. Those are all principles that you need to learn. You need to learn how the trigger feels, and you need to commit all this to memory, so it's muscle memory, so that you take that to the range and prove that you've got the fundamentals through live fire. Once you do that, there are some drills that I think are great to always just have in your repertoire, let alone if you're a new shooter. It's really good to get on these sooner than later. Things like ball dummy is really good for testing your flinch response and making sure that you're staying on top of that. The sooner you do that, the sooner everything else is going to fall into place when it comes to shooting handguns. Now, once you do that, once you've gotten all that under control and you understand that support hand side grip is really important and you've got all your biomechanics down, move on to actually taming that recoil. And yeah, that's, bill drill all day. Just keep doing bill drills. Everybody should be doing bill drills. That's just a great drill. And everyone benefits from it. And you're gonna see your progress start to advance as you continue to do that drill and get used to doing recoil management. And that is something that you can really only do with live ammo, so therefore it is a very useful range drill. those are just some suggestions. There's so many other things out there that you can do, but that kind of really covers the fundamentals for me. And finally, Derek asks, what advice would you give to a traditional gun owner in terms of being an ally for other folks who don't fit into that category, especially new shooters in places like gun shops, ranges, etc., in areas where there may not be many options for simply not doing business with folks who are at best ignorant or stuck to tradition and at worst minor league asshats? Great question. The gun world is full of all sorts of characters. Some people are really cool, some people are not. Some people just are ignorant, and some people are willfully ignorant, and some people are just outright mean and prejudiced. That is simply the reality. So yeah, this is real. My advice to any of those people, though, is no matter where you're coming from and why, when it comes to people coming into our community, into our spaces, into our hobby, that's always a good thing. That is only going to add numbers to the weight of firearm owners, and therefore give us more traction and ability to continue doing the things that we do with firearms. We should absolutely be welcoming new shooters in any and every way we possibly can, and beyond that, make it easy for them. Make it easier than it was for us. That's extremely important, and that comes with humility. That comes with listening. That comes with shoving your ego aside and being a reflexive person, making sure that you are creating that space for whoever needs it and listening to their needs and being able to be critical of your own behavior are all extremely necessary skills, and without them, this hobby is absolutely doomed. If we close that gate, if we start to gatekeep it from people who are interested in learning more and doing more, then we are, pun intended, shooting ourselves in the foot. So be humble, be a good listener, and be kind. That's what I have to say. And that wraps up my little Q&A session. I really hope that you all enjoyed this. This is definitely a departure from my normal format, but I figured it was a good way to connect with the supporters that I have on Patreon. I really appreciate y'all, so it's really good to have a little bit of a conversation with you. So if you do want to help chip in, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. This channel is not at all monetized otherwise. I don't run ads on it because I don't want to give Google my money, and I don't want to bother you with that. I simply want people to voluntarily give me their money if they want to. And if you want to, but you can't afford to, that's totally fine too. I'm just happy you're here. So I appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart. It really helps a lot. And with all that being said, this is TGF signing off. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there. And as always, please take care. Bye.